Good morning, everybody. I'm Barbara Suplee. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Army Navy Business Group within SAIC. And I'm going to give these gentlemen an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I'll start with you, Admiral Corey, if you can give us your name, your current role, and what your relationship is to autonomy and interoperability. And I will ask the same of Colonel Stepp in oh, thank you. And of Paul.
Thanks, Barbara. Well, I'm Brian Corey. I spent a little while in the U.S. Navy, primarily flying airplanes, and then later in the acquisition world. And I spent about the last 10 years of my career helping the Navy and the Marine Corps buy high-end weapon systems, and mostly to include unmanned airplanes. I was also teamed with the Air Force and with the Naval Sea Systems Command, and it's really exciting to be here and talk to you all. I'm currently trying to help industry figure out this world of autonomous systems.
Barbara, thanks for hosting today. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks for all being here today for FCA West. A great opportunity, bringing a lot of minds and patriots together for the sake of the nation. Kevin Stepp, 1MEF-G6 Communications, a career communications officer. I've deployed 5 times, 4 times to combat, worked across the MAGTF and in joint formations, recently served in a fellowship with SpaceX. Last tour was at the Pentagon, working in the DoD CIO office, military assistant, and I've currently been serving as the 1MEF-G6 for about 18 months. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
Awesome. Paul?
Thanks for having me here, Barbara. So my name is Paul Lewin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Havoc AI. So Havoc is a collaborative autonomy company, and what we're doing is building the technologies required to operate thousands of autonomous systems over the next 2 years. So we're only 2 years old, but in the 2 years that we've been in business, we've built 85 autonomous vessels, all the way from a 14-foot vessel to a 100-foot ship that's in Hawaii right now. And right now, we're building a 200-foot autonomous ship with one of the world's biggest shipyards known as Hanwha. And the thing we did differently back in 2024, we looked at the space, and we realized that everyone that was trying to build autonomous vessels was focused on the hardware, right? They were literally reinventing the boat. And we asked ourselves, do we need to reinvent the boat? People have been sailing the Pacific for 5,000 years. And so what we did was we went out to the commercial boat builders, and we said, hey, we need to build thousands to tens of thousands of autonomous surface vessels very quickly. Can we do it? And across the boat, they said, yes. The commercial boat builders, especially when you talk about composite, that they could build thousands. So once we didn't have to focus on the boat building, we became a software company, and we can move at the speed of software. And in the last 2 years, those 85 vessels, we've had them deployed almost every day, 5 or more vessels on the water in Rhode Island, in San Diego, in Hawaii. And today, if you come back later, we'll have 5 vessels on the water. And we do that every day, right? So we've collected over 200 billion data points to iterate our algorithms on and train our models on. And that's what makes our software mature. So, if we were asked to build thousands of autonomous vessels right now, we could do it over the next year. And it's because of the approach that we took.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Paul. And SAIC and Havoc AI have been working together in partnership to extend what we do from the Joint Range Extension to ensure that we're interoperable with the existing Navy and Marine Corps' tactical data links. So we're very excited about that partnership. Admiral Corey, can you tell me what operational gap is driving the Navy to push interoperable autonomous systems today?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Tough question, actually, because there's an enormous number of gaps that come together with that question about autonomous systems and interoperable systems. There's 2 things, really. One is talked about a lot, and that is, can we send an unmanned vehicle into an area that you wouldn't want to send someone, one of our sons and daughters, into combat? I think that's the low bar. The real advantage, and Paul kind of touched on it here, is having thousands of new sensors, thousands of new systems that can employ weapons that can augment the human, and we can do it at scale. And the most important word in both of your last few sentences was interoperable. We've been using that word for decades, but we've finally come to a position where we know how to do interoperable. That's the challenge to industry, is how are you going to compete and where are you going to partner? And is your open better than their open? And it's time to get over those questions, and it's time to actually partner with our services.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Colonel Stepp, how do autonomous systems change operational approaches in a contested maritime and littoral environment?
Thanks, Barbara. I think sometimes when we think about autonomous assets, to Brian's point, not just can it go where a human may not want to go, or delivering a weapon system, or delivering a point of aim, point of impact. We want to think about them as giving options and new combinations to a commander. To what Brian and Paul both said, these should really be considered, to Admiral Caldwell's point, multi-mission, multi-role platforms. They can see, they can sense, they can collect, they can supply, they can sustain, and they can target. And so in these contested areas, particularly in the maritime and littoral region, not only do they give us mass, that kind of overmatch that we've been looking for, but the ability to develop the environment, to sustain, to pre-position. And what I think when we're really looking for in the contested area is to develop persistence through small signature, low signature, resilient assets, integrated with the Navy, as the Marine Corps integrated with the Navy, but also contributing to the joint force. I think that the strongest point of these assets is probably a germane topic, but it's often said of AI. It's unemotional and it never gets tired. So where can you put that type of asset to just persist in the domain, to develop the situation and provide advantage to the commander?
Awesome. Paul, where do operational expectations often diverge from our technical reality with autonomous missions, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, my biggest recommendation is that, as industry, we have to stop looking at ourselves as building technology, especially when we're talking about defense, right? The warfighters want capabilities. My former life, I was a Navy test pilot. When I looked at an F-18, it wasn't an airplane, right? It was a weapon system that happened to fly. So when you talk about autonomy, you have to look at it the same way, right? They're not toys. We don't want them to be autonomous just to be autonomous, right? The Admiral and the Colonel hinted at it. They need to do something. They need to solve a problem and provide a capability. So where do autonomous systems, where can they provide the warfighters with some solutions, right? It's in what they talked about. You can take them out of danger, right? If you think about the Pacific, because of the missiles, our manned ships are going to have to get out of the weapons engagement zone, right? So we won't know what's happening in there. So what can you do? You can put autonomous vessels inside there and create the common operating picture, another buzzword we talk about, to see it, right? Because the destroyers and the carriers will be outside. And so to do that, you have to be interoperable, right? You can't have autonomous systems that are just toys out there just doing their own thing. They have to talk to Link 16, right? That's why our partnership with SAIC, with Joint Range Extension, is important, right? If these things don't talk back to the manned assets, they're just toys and R&D assets. And I don't think that's what the warfighters want, right? They want capabilities from these autonomous systems.
Yeah, I think to your point, Paul, not only is there a necessity to integrate, but to do it quickly, right? There's really an imperative. The Marine Corps, we're in the implementation phase of force design. So if something's brought to the fleet or brought to our naval forces, how can we put it in the water and get it pull the visualization, pull the sensing off time now. Great point. Great point.
I also think that it's really important for us to think about what the mission is for this capability. Admiral Skillman mentioned it this morning when he spoke, that the general purpose forces and the exquisite weapon systems that we've built to date have a purpose that we maybe use, 1 to 2% of the time. What is autonomy bringing to the table that will handle the deterrence for a much broader, 98, 99% of the time. And it's incredibly important that we're not in a one-to-one relationship and that we understand how to interact in a one-to-many relationship versus in a crewed and uncrewed pairing is an important element of that as well. We're going to have we're very dramatic back there. I didn't plan that, but here we go. When we talk about partnership and acquisition and the path forward, I think we all have a part to play in this. And Admiral Corey, if I could ask you from the Warfighter acquisition system, which I know you've been a part of, what expectations are we changing or need to change for speed and interoperability?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. Well, the first is speed. It's simply unacceptable, some of the timelines that we've had. And, there was a time in my life when I used to complain about not having a defense budget on time.
Yes.
And you could point at, the Pentagon or other people. I think we've gotten beyond that. And, we are America. We are a democracy. Sometimes it's messy. And the acquisition community and industry and the warfighters have got to find a new way to partner. The single biggest question when it comes to autonomous systems is trust. When you talk to a warfighter, they want to know what's it going to do in this scenario. And these highly capable systems like Paul is talking about, that's a hard question. And so these partnerships between the warfighter and acquisition have got to evolve. The interactions can't be on a 6-month basis or an annual basis or at an annual conference like we're at today. We have to find a new way to partner. I think that's starting to happen. It's pretty exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing what people come up with to solve this problem of trust with an autonomous vehicle.
I also think that it's important that from an industry perspective, like Paul and I have been working, that we're leaning in for those partnerships to bring capability to the government and to our warfighter customer versus waiting for that to be advertised. So I think the call to action for all of us is to make sure we're leaning in to that, to the need that is out there. But to that end, Colonel Stepp, where does earlier collaboration between operators and acquisition teams most improve outcomes?
I think to the leaning in point, Barbara, we want reps and sets. We want reps and sets. We want our Marines to have the technology in their hands, and they're going to do bottom-up refinement. We're really in a phase where America's military is implementing the highest end of commercial-grade technology and then tailoring it to military application and making it even more exquisite. But the exquisite ideas and the refinement is coming from our young Marines and sailors. And what we really want to do is help strengthen their familiarity, get it in their hands, and give them sets, and then create those conditions to letting them inform us how we can use it more effectively.
Awesome, thank you. Paul, to Colonel Stepp's answer, where have you leaned in for earlier engagement, and what do you think that means for your company and for the operators to be leaning in earlier in that process?
Yeah, and that's a great question, right? The Admiral hinted at it. You can't wait years and build a prototype and hope that it's going to work, right? So in our case, we got a little lucky. So we started in 2024, and we started by building 12 autonomous vessels, so 14-foot vessels. And we actually took it to an exercise called Silent Swarm, which was a Navy exercise on the Great Lakes. And at the end of that exercise, we had a program manager from Naval sit us down and said, I want to buy all 12 of your boats. And I thought he was joking, because I was like, hey, we built this in 6 months. Like, we're a 6-month-old company. Like, you do not want to buy these. And they said, no, we want to buy it because we want to figure out how to use it, right? And internally, at that time, we were a team of 5 people, and it was very risky for us, right, to give this program office the 12 of our vessels, but we did it, and it ended up working out so well, so that for the last 2 years, NIWIC and TESFO 66 has been using our vessels almost daily, and everything we learned from that helped us figure out things that most tech companies don't think about, right? That what we call the .mil PF in the military, like someone has to buy these things, someone has to ship them, someone has to maintain them, someone has to wash the boats, right? All these things that if we hadn't given them those 12 vessels, we would have never figured out, right? And that's the difference between doing an R&D experiment and building a product, right, and delivering capabilities to the warfighter. So I would say, all the companies here, what we need to do is get the product into the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible. And on the customer side, you have to realize when I give you a prototype, it is a prototype, right? There'll be issues. So I think, as the Colonel said, we're starting to work together very well, and you're starting to see the results of that.
Yeah, and I think indicative to Admiral Corey's comment about trust and the relationship that exists between the fleet and industry is really demonstrated in Paul's point that there's a tolerance for a 70 or 80% product where we can take a core capability and work with industry to make it exactly what the military force needs.
Absolutely. Admiral Corey, how does interoperable autonomous change help commanders achieve situational awareness and decision advantage?
That's a big question, but I'll give it a shot.
No pressure.
So the quest for a common operational picture goes back decades. Every commander wants to know what is going on. Well, it goes back to Roman times, really. When are we going to be attacked? What is going on the battlefield? How do you get through the fog of war? And autonomous systems have clearly made an enormous difference there. But the key word, I think, in your question, Barbara, is that word interoperable. How do you scale quickly if each individual vendor, each individual platform requires its own integration into the system? When you go to interoperable, open systems, you can quickly scale. You can bring an Air Force unit in to a Marine operation seamlessly. You can fuse information together to make targets. It's been a quest for a long time. We've made enormous progress recently, and what is, I think, most encouraging is that pace of change has accelerated.
Yeah. And I do think, to your point, that it's extremely important, the open piece, truly having MOSA compliant systems, not MOSA compliant systems within a vertical stack, but truly a MOSA compliant system for there to be rapidly developed capabilities that are easily consumable, in that interoperability space. So, Colonel Stepp, how does access to that integrated autonomous data affect decision making at the tactical level?
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that is full of opportunity, and the opportunity is information advantage, giving a positional advantage to our commanders and staffs. To Paul's point, 2 billion data points. 2 billion data points, tracking that. Some of that maybe is vessel telemetry, but some of that is information being collected by the vessels. I want that information. I want to sift through it. I want to take information, move it to intelligence, and develop understanding for staffs and commanders. AI is really this opportunity to sift through what could potentially be 2 billion data points of information overload and transitioning it to understanding. The bottom line is getting access to these types of vessels, getting access to these types of platforms are increasing our fleet and naval commanders' ability to sense and act across all domains, and we're doing it faster than the adversary, taking their time away as we make decision advantages faster, and hence delaying their action and advantaging the U.S. forces.
Awesome, thank you. Paul, what design considerations really matter when integrating autonomous data into command and control environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's 200 billion data points, not 2 billion. uh, uh, you have to be open, right? You hit it at it, which is surprising to a commercial company like us, because if you think about, Google or Microsoft or HP, in commercial industry, when you build cloud systems, you are interoperable, right? Because commercial entities need to exchange data with each other. But in the defense space, somehow we make it so difficult. And a little bit of that is policy, but a little bit of that is on industry side to protect your stack. But in the commercial space, yourself, an iPhone talks to an Android, right? Fine, right? That's not a big challenge. So from the beginning, we were lucky because we started in 2024. So we got to utilize everything that existed in commercial industry to make sure that our stack was truly open. So within about a year of starting the company, if you connected to Havoc, you connected to ATAC, so your data was bidirectional with any ATAC server running. You connected to a Navy system called Minotaur. And now with SAIC, you connect to Link 16 for your Joint Range Extension, right? You have to be able to do that. And so what we are trying to do is now any autonomous system that wants to connect to Link 16 or ATAC or even Lattice, they can just connect to Havoc and they don't have to redo all the work that we did, right? And I think that's same thing with Joint Range Extension, right? These things are how we put thousands of autonomous systems into the real world right now, right? If you have, your system that are vertically integrated and, it's very hard to integrate, it's not going to work out there, right? And I think we're seeing a lot of that over the past year of these companies that are trying to vendor lock the customers and not truly being interoperable, right? They use MOSAR as a buzzword, but they're not actually open.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that brings us to the idea through of resilience and trust through operating in environments of degradation as well, right? Because this is not going to be pristine communication environments. And to that end, Admiral Corey, how do the ConOps and the rules of engagement need to evolve to employ autonomous systems in contested and degraded environments?
You seem to ask hard questions, but I guess that's why I'm here.
Hard questions for you.
So rules of engagement. I'll tell you that I had, when I was on active duty, I had a very smart and powerful person tell me that the American people aren't going to accept an autonomous weapon coming off an airplane. It's just not the way that we think. It's not the way that we operate. Until I pointed out that we've had the HARM missile since the 80s. And you launch that missile and it's going to figure it out. We've had harpoons since the mid 70s. And so I think our biggest challenge is that when we start to hear the words, and Paul, he's got some amazing words. He talks really fast, and the AI and our brains have a hard time wrapping around it. It really isn't fundamentally different than the way we've done warfare before. But the question of how are we going to trust? If that autonomous vehicle that is the taxi has a collision, is that worse than if a taxi driver has the same collision? In our society today, it is. It's going to make the news in many cases, where a taxi hitting someone isn't. The same principles are applying today as we approach our rules of engagement. The colonel hit on the point multiple times today. Getting these devices in the hands of the warfighter, straining our imagination, not using the new weapons the way we use our old weapons, which is a common trap that we fall into, and iterating again and again at speed, with partnership with industry, in partnership with the acquisition community, and having those reps and sets very, very quickly. I think that's the key.
Awesome. Colonel, step to that point, and for the technology that has been put into your young Marines' hands to date, what have they been learning, and what can you share with industry that helps us respond better to that?
Yeah. I think broadly what our Marines and sailors are helping us identify are where are the gaps? Where are the gaps? And super excited to hear about the what I would call data leak translation that's happening internal to Havoc, because we may deliver a system and I've got a young sergeant or young lieutenant telling me, hey, sir, it doesn't connect that way. We need to put something in the middle to make the connection to do the machine level work. So the feedback up is incredibly valuable. They're also really tied in with policy. It's a young force and they know the frameworks they're operating in. And I've had many conversations with young Marines and sailors who've identified to me, hey, sir, I need to be able to do this thing, but this policy restricts me. It's technically possible. Can you help me out with the policy? And that's where I love to get involved to help make our Marines and sailors successful. Helping to identify those technology gaps that industry is quickly closing, and then helping identify where our leadership can cover down to support policy refinement and revision.
Yeah, that's hugely powerful, right? Especially when we're moving into kind of uncharted territory with the use of crewed and uncrewed systems. It's going to be vital.
Yeah, and I think that the technology is moving so quickly at an exciting pace, but in some cases, they're driving an electric car and asking us, where's the gas cap?
Right.
And fortunately, our young Marines identify that stuff right away and help cue the leadership in, hey, can you help resolve this for me? All day.
Awesome. Paul, how do autonomy and interoperable systems behave predictably and responsibly when conditions are uncertain or degraded?
Yeah, the biggest thing there is that we have to assume that you're going to be in a denied environment, right? If you're building systems now in 2026 that require GPS or persistent comms, they're not going to work, right? We've seen that in Ukraine, but think about the Pacific, right? Not even because of jamming, but because of the distance, right? We're talking about 8,000 miles of ocean there, and the other side is going to jam, GPS comms, and that's where I think a lot of time people mistake automation with autonomy, right? There are a lot of companies that are claiming autonomy and they require persistent comms, right? That's not autonomy, that's automation. If you're doing remote control or waypoint following, you're just automating, right? Which is great, but that's gonna break down in the Pacific when you don't have persistent comms and when you can't have 1,000 sailors controlling 1,000 boats, right? The paradigm we need to shift to is one operator supervising thousands of autonomous vessels, and those vessels need to be truly autonomous. And when I say autonomy, I mean humans on the loop, right? Just as the admiral or the colonel might task Marines or sailors by just giving verbal commands, we got to go do that, right? You got to be able to tell these autonomous vessels, hey, go search this area for a Liu Yang destroyer, right? And when you find it, do this. And that should be the only communication that you need. And the rest of the time, these vessels have to operate themselves. Now, there's a big piece about trust there, right? And that's where both the Admiral and the Colonel mentioned it. You've got to get these tech in the hands of the warfighters right now. They have got to become comfortable with how they operate, and especially the end game, right? We have to make sure that the rules of engagement are followed. New policy is written. Otherwise, the tech is going to work, but the policy and the training, it's going to lack. So it's the partnership piece, right? We got to build capabilities and get it into the hands of the warfighters right now.
So I know that we've experienced it, Paul. I think you've experienced it as well. Admiral Corey, what's the biggest barrier to moving autonomy from demonstrations into operational use and to achieve some of the learning mentioned by Colonel Stepp?
Yeah, the Colonel, he covered it. The biggest barrier is getting the reps and sets. I don't see another way. As Paul just described, the difference between automation and autonomy is hard to wrap your heads around. So if we are going to increase the pace of scaling of the autonomous vehicles, we're going to have to focus on it like it's our day job. The concept of manned and unmanned teaming, it gets thrown around, but I don't think we've sat down and talked about what does that actually look like. We've covered the keys already. It's open systems, it's interoperable, and it's finding new ways to partner. I think we're about there.
Right.
The question that I think we should all ask ourselves is, are we doing enough, and are we doing it fast enough?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because we are doing it in experimentation. We're in exercises, but we're not getting the reps and sets at scale that I think our soldiers and soldiers, sailors, and Marines, from a joint perspective, are going to be prepared to trust those autonomous systems. And how do we take it from the experimentation space? And I'm going to ask this question of you. And I'm throwing him a curveball here. But how do we get at scale faster with, the training objectives of what we're doing, day to day?
Barbara, great question, and I'll get in the batter's box, take a swing at this one. I think on the reps and such piece that Admiral Corey's discussed, and what Paul said about how we employ assets. Sir, when you mentioned the way we fight wars previously is the way we fight wars today, I'd never thought of being able to give these assets mission type orders, right? At a certain level, we lead massive organizations, and we may give one command, and the formation moves out. How can we employ assets in that way? And I think the objective probably looks like the ability for one operator, a leader, to give commands to autonomous assets to integrate with the force, and that fleet moves out doing the given task or completing the purpose, the guidance of purpose given. That's a really great. I'm kind of having like a paradigm thinking about it right now, because for so often I think we've thought about kind of 1v1 with robotic and autonomous assets, but really to get after a fleet, a swarm, mass, it needs to be mission type, command type orders, which is something naval officers know very well, right?
Right. And to be able to the awareness of the autonomous systems and being able to use those autonomous systems just like you would use a manned system, right? And as things attrit, being able to use the autonomous systems to backfill that same objective that the crewed platform might have had. I think that's really the challenge, and that trust piece is a huge part of that. And to that end, what do you think the fleet needs to see to develop that operational trust?
Yeah, I would offer trust exists. Trust exists. We're really aggressively leaning forward in getting all the autonomous or remote assets we can in any domain. I think what the fleet really wants is we can do remote. Remote's old hat. We're doing it right now. We're doing it in support of ongoing operations. What we really want to be able to do is that simultaneous multi-domain. Having undersea assets talk to airborne assets, talk to surface assets, have them work collaboratively together with crewed and uncrewed platforms, and bringing together, really giving us mass, but giving us tremendous more capability to sense, make sense, and move the 200 billion data points. Is that right? Yeah. From information to understanding for the commander. And so we are just going to keep leaning forward, partnering with industry to get after it.
Speaking of which, so Paul, what do you think the hardest technical challenge in integrating unmanned surface vehicles into the Navy operations at scale?
It's integrating into existing systems, right? If you think about Link 16, without JRE, in the past, what we would have had to do was to put a MITS terminal on every boat, right? So our vessels, we sell to the Army and Navy for about $150,000. If you think about a MITS terminal, it's probably more expensive than $150,000, right? So you don't want to put a MITS terminal on every boat, and these are attritable assets, right? They're meant to be blown up, and they're meant to just be in the thousands, right? So you don't want thousands of MITS terminal floating around, and that's where partnerships between SAIC and Havoc is important, right? By integrating JRE, now we don't have to put MITS terminals on every boat. We can still pass data radar to Link 16 through Joint Range Extension, and the hybrid fleet concept still works, right? So the crewed assets will still know what the autonomous systems are seeing, and we can still create a common operating picture. So I think the partnership and what the Connor talked about, right? I think on the warfighter side, they're ready to lean forward, right? Even some of the tough problems, the biggest problem in autonomy is when you let an autonomous system hit something else, right? Go kinetic, and there are solutions to that, right? That we were talking to a Navy customer that says, well, I'll just make a kill box where there'll be a contract that no friendly assets will be in the kill box, right? At that point, who cares, right? If you're in that kill box, you are a hostile. You're declared a hostile, and you can solve some ROE problems there. So the warfighters are starting to innovate there. So it's on the industry side to make sure that we keep up with them and provide them these capabilities over and over and walk through it together.
So from a platform provider perspective, how does designing for producibility influence speed to fleet and sustained operational use?
Yeah, that's everything, right? We started Havoc in 2024 precisely because we were frustrated that the U.S. Navy didn't have thousands of autonomous vessels already. So when we started, we went and looked and we said, hey, what is going on here? And we said, it's because people are building one-off prototypes, right? People say, I have to build an unmanned surface or autonomous surface vessel. And so they built one beautiful autonomous surface vessel. And and half the time it's remote control and it's not autonomous. So in 2024, we raised $600,000 in pre-seed fund. With a team of 5 people, we built 12 autonomous surface vessels. Our investors thought we were crazy, but we told them the product isn't one boat. It's swarms of boats, right? We need to scale for thousands of vessels. And by forcing ourselves to do that part, to understand scalability, now we're in a position where we can build thousands, 5,000, 10,000 if the customer wanted it. And so you have got to start with scalability as a feature of your product.
So another question, and maybe this is actually for any of the panelists. So when we have first conflict, and we have thousands, tens of thousands in theater, is there a forward deployed concept that we should have? If these are attritable, how are we replacing them? I mean, sir, have you thought about the kind of replacement of this over the course of conflict?
I think the replacement mechanism is similar to activities currently happening, and we're set in the theater. To Admiral Cottle's point, we're looking to build capability and capacity, and that's across all warfighting functions. My day-to-day job is building on infrastructure forward, but we've got brilliant logisticians looking to build capacity forward. We've got brilliant fires teams looking at where can we sense, where can we identify adversary capability and take action upon it. And so it's really about building capacity forward. And I think as we think about autonomous assets, we got to remember these things have class 9 blocks, repair part blocks, but we also need the ability to have the infrastructure forward, the C4 substrate, to make them effectively integrated when they show up in theater.
And Paul, what do you think of that from a provider perspective, right? What do we need as industry to do to be able to have that capacity forward?
Yeah, you've got to work with your allies, right? If you think about thousands of these vessels, it doesn't make sense to continue building them, in the U.S. and have to ship it 8,000 miles, right? Those ships are going to get blown up. So what we do is, obviously we're partnered with Taiwan because, for Taiwan, if they can put thousands of these vessels in the water, that might just protect them, right? That might just change the calculus for those ships coming across the strait. But that gives us a second ability, right? Now, these same boats that was providing to the U.S. government can also be produced in Taiwan, in Guam, in the Philippines, so that you don't have that 8,000 miles, that tyranny of distance to ship these boats across, right? And they're software-defined vessels. So all we need is to build the vessels there and deploy software, right? Now, obviously, we're not going to give Taiwan or the Philippines the software that we give to the U.S. government, but that's the beauty of software, right? We can easily change it. And if a conflict were to happen, now rather than the U.S. having 1,000, Now we can combine with Taiwan, the Philippines for 5,000 vessels, right? And that'll change the calculus in the Western Pacific there.
So pivoting for a minute, and any of you guys can answer this, but where does earlier collaboration between operators, acquisition, and industry make the biggest difference?
Barbara, if I can tie that into what Paul was just talking about, there's efforts underway to take this entire digital string. So we have operated for decades forward because we had nightly DHL hits. And for our carriers, we have onboard delivery of parts, and we can do sustained operations, and it's amazing. Our logisticians do amazing things. That's not going to work in the scenario that Paul just described. And so you pull on that digital and interoperable thread, and you can now manufacture mostly anywhere. You can repair in ways that aren't conceived. And that's going to hurt the head of a lot of industry, the OEM manufacturers of platforms that have had a business model of doing the, whether you call it MRO in an aircraft or whatever. We have to be able to make parts. And the digital world, if it's truly interoperable, is going to allow us to do that.
And last question before I open it up for Q&A. What one change in the next 2 years would accelerate interoperability autonomy for naval warfighting? And again, I open it up to all panelists.
I'll take that. From industry perspective, I think the customer, the U.S. government has to get comfortable buying software. Right, and you can't look at software when we're talking about autonomous systems as like Microsoft Word, right? That's not what it is. It's the beauty in software-defined hardware is that you can continue to update the software, right? So now, rather than waiting 5 years to update, the version of the software, we can do it almost weekly. But that's a change, right? That's a thing that the acquisition community isn't ready for. And I think we're all getting ready for it. The acquisition community knows that, and they're setting up processes to let that happen. And once the U.S. government is comfortable and able to buy software and not see these as platforms, right? I think it's going to be a real game changer, and that's what I'm most excited about. That's how we get thousands in the next year.
Barbara, everything Paul said. Everything
Okay.
Paul said. Yeah, I love it. It's great.
Well, and to that end, I think that both the government and industry have to balance zero trust and the cyber posture with being able to rapidly change that software. I mean, there is a risk profile there that we all have to get pretty comfortable with quickly. But I would love to open the floor to anyone that has a question. We have a mic up here in the front. Does anyone have questions for our panelists?
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my question. Can you talk a little bit about what if the enemy were to try to hijack the autonomous systems and how we would defend against that, please? Daryl Porter, AFCEA, STF.
So from my perspective, that's why they're called attritable assets, right? They're $150,000 boats. If the enemy is either targeting that $150,000 boat, or if they're spending resources to literally go and pick up a $150,000 boat, I think we win, right? In that case, they're not targeting a destroyer, right? They're not targeting something more expensive. So we want them to go after. That's the whole point. It's the U.S. Navy, all the services that made up this whole attritable, right? That's what they're talking about. That's why you shouldn't put a MIDS terminal or anything classified on these $100,000 boats, right? These should be attritable assets. And that's where the name Havoc comes from, right? We're trying to create havoc in the oceans. So to your point, I don't care, right? Now, here's the thing. They are, they can go kinetic, right? So if you come near it, and the human operator has said, if you come near this vessel, you should be declared hostile. The autonomous vessels can hit that vessel, right? So there's a safety there, but there are other things we can do. If you really care about the software or the hardware, there's companies working on tamper devices, right? So things that if you were to go near it, to open it, or to try to get into the software, we could wipe out everything. So we have, so we're an In-Q-Tel company, if you know what that means. So for some of those customers, we integrate those devices. But when you're talking about 10,000 of these vessels, I don't think we should care, right? We should want them to go after 10,000 of these vessels.
Next question.
Good morning. I'd like to thank you guys for your time and your insight. I'm with First Radio. My question is, what is your timeline that we'd expect that this technology would be widespread to Marines or sailors alike?
Sir, if I could ask you to answer that question.
Corporal, thanks for the question. That's awesome. Power to 1 MiG, right? Yeah. Hey, yesterday, we want the capability now. We're on a pretty short time horizon, and we're looking to have a capability set forward in early 2027. So, but I know there's a lead time with that, right? If it shows up in February 27, probably not enough time for you, right? You probably need it now, and so we're looking to integrate capabilities. We're working with a lot of different partners to bring in capabilities right now to give you the lead time you need to be familiar with that asset and employ it to the best of its ability inside your formation. Great question.
Thank you.
Sir, your question?
Hi, Andy Charles. As we talk about autonomous systems, we talked air, surface, ground, subsurface. With the advent of proliferated LEO, is space part of your autonomous network?
I think that's a yes, and then that's probably not adequate for what reason you asked the question. Space has been doing autonomy for a very long time. Might not fit Paul's definition. It's more automation in some cases, and certainly there are people on the loop. But you mentioned LEO. I think I would expand it and say, in today's world and in any future world that we can imagine, it is integrated into everything that we just discussed in one way or another without going into details. But it's a great question. I think there's a lot of lessons in how we've approached space and where we are today that are being applied in the domains that you just described. But I think they can be applied in more thoroughly and more thoughtfully. So it's a great point.
Andy, it's good to see you again. I didn't recognize you with...
I had a hard time recognizing him as well. Good to see you, Andy.
Sir, your question?
Hey, good morning. Thank you. One question from the acquisition perspective. What have y'all seen as the best, either vehicles, ways to structure acquisitions to accelerate the speed? I think earlier you might have said 6 months, and I laughed because that sounds miraculous. But just from your experience, if there's anything to get those rolling faster.
So it starts with alignment. If you can get your department, and I'll say your department since you're wearing a uniform different than I did, to really align with the goal. And that's a lot harder to do than it is to say. Obviously, money is usually part of it. The requirement and the operators, when you can get them aligned. And then you have a vendor that is going to be responsive and can deliver. Some are better than others, without going into any, we don't need to get into that morass, right? But when you can get everyone aligned on a goal, we can do amazing things in our country. And I think it needs to become the rule rather than the exception. I could give you several. The Marines with TrueS, if anyone understands that one, that's a small unmanned logistics. The single thing the Marine Corps did that hurt our heads on the acquisition side is they said we had 1 day to train a Marine, never see an unmanned vehicle before. They had to be able to unpack it, assemble it, program it, operate it, repair it, put it away, and be ready to move. You had 1 day to train the Marine in every single function there. That drove the design. That drove the concept of operations. That drove the acquisition approach. It drove several competitors out of the field, quite frankly. And it's being used today by Marines. So that's one example. I don't know if I ducked your question. Call me on it if I did.
No, that helps for sure. And then thinking of where we can take it and operationalize it. I mean, people throw out OTAs, people throw out service. Like, we're more so buying a service with 24/7 responsiveness than we're just buying a system, right? Like, it's going to have to be that fast. And so I don't know if y'all had seen, or are they just structured as service contracts? Is it something bigger?
All of that. I've seen groups go to other services that had a contract vehicle ready. It's whatever's going to meet the mission. It's exactly like the mission orders that the colonel said. Where I've faulted the acquisition community that I was part of for a while is we forget our military learning about getting the job done when we walk into the business world. And for you wearing a uniform, the civilians around you, they probably have the answers. We have amazing government servants that can advise you on all of that. But OTAs, yeah, those can work. Other things can work. Focus on the mission just like you do in a warfighting or in your case, maybe a law enforcement mission, and just get the job done. And don't whine about, I'm not saying you whine, but it does happen in the acquisition business about someone else's problem. When you turn it around and you say, we are the problem, suddenly solutions start to come forward.
And to speak to solution delivery, we're all familiar with Project Overmatch and Project Dynamis, and being in the fleet, receiving these capabilities. These offices, these projects, are delivering capability at tremendous speed. It's eye-watering to be on the receiving end and know that, maybe a year prior, maybe not 6 months, maybe a year prior, an idea was born and it's being delivered to the fleet immediately. 2024, that's a pretty short time horizon, sir. Pretty short time horizon. So really what's happening with the alignment in the service and industry partners, we're delivering on extreme speed to put capability into the hands of our Marines and sailors.
And I would say, even in the DHS, right? We were most recently asked, hey, can you deliver 1,000 boats in 6 months by Under Secretary, right? And then we're like, we can do it. Can you do it? And he was like, things are changing. He was like, we can figure it out. It's just a matter of finding the money. And the Admiral and the Colonel hinted at it, right? There are so many different contracting vehicles that are available that if you wanted to get creative, you could go and get creative, right? And now there is funding for autonomous systems. So that's why I think the next year is going to be very exciting.
I also want to offer that there's a lot of additional acquisition changes that are happening, but these partnerships are equally as important because there are large contracts out there that can help facilitate, buying behaviors more rapidly, and it's up to all of us to really be talking about how can we get this done versus the obstacles that might be in the way, and maybe most importantly for the warfighter is to be focused on the outcome. Because if we're not focused on the outcome and we're focused on bespoke requirements, we're going to get tripped up in that space.
Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Ma'am, your question?
Good morning, folks. I hope you're doing well today. I have a question regarding logistics and operational strategy, if that's all right. Earlier, you mentioned goals of expanding your autonomous systems to work across different domains, where you see domain partnerships and different domains working together. Given that there are logistical barriers posed to working within different domains that can pop up when we're working to try and deliver something quick and decisive results, how do you see that coming forward to play in the future as you work to integrate that? Do you think there will be needs for a different sector of logistics to help you coordinate that? Or do you believe the resources that we already have are capable of delivering these results?
Thanks for a hard question.
If I could for just a second, can you introduce yourself? Because we didn't get your name and your organization, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Gianna Ferry. I'm a student at the University of North Carolina, and I'm here to learn from you guys. So,
Wow. The world has a bright future if we've got students asking questions like that. I think logistics has to be completely rethought. There are you pick your cliche about amateurs do this and professionals do logistics, all of those sorts of things. But with the digital design and digital manufacturing that is starting to really hit the warfighting arena, you can reimagine logistics. You're collecting data, as Paul said, at rates that have never been collected before. And so you can start to predict failures. I saw one of our universities at the microscopic level when you're producing it's not called 3D printing in metals, but additive manufacturing of metals. You know the defects of each individual part, and you can then predict failures in ways that have never been conceived of. You can manufacture parts in theater, and you can start to ship raw materials as opposed to machine parts. It completely changes the concept of logistics. And you talked about cross-domain. Today, an air safe component is tested at much more stringent rates than most components that would be on a boat. That may not be necessary in that environment I just talked to you about, digital design, digital manufacture, and the kind of data that we have. But we're going to have to reimagine it in many ways. And so I think we need smart people from our universities to come in and certainly you need to learn the way things are done, but look for new ways.
And I'll add that, you got to look at what's happening in Ukraine, right? So they've got air, ground and surface assets, and even underwater assets, all and manned assets, and the building in I think some crazy number, right? Hundreds of thousands, I think it's what they're doing, at least for the quadcopters a month. And so it's being done, right? They're doing it out of necessity. And so from our side, we need to keep an eye on that and make sure we learn the right lessons to apply, obviously, to the Pacific. And so I think that a little bit of at Havoc, we have very good partnerships with the Ukrainians, and we learn a lot from them about specifically what you're talking about, right, in logistics and efficiency there.
and if you don't mind me asking a follow-up question to that, what do you, as the private sector, as I imagine the private sector is the start of innovation when we're thinking about new systems for logistics management, how do you see your part and your company playing a role in that development?
You've got to form partnerships, right? So obviously, SAIC, Havoc, but we also partner with a lot of people. There are a lot of, especially new startups that are trying to solve this logistics problem, specifically, optimization, right? There's a lot of work being done in the optimization space. So we work with them, even though some of them are, very early stage companies, to make sure that we understand what they're working on and that we're going to be able to use their systems in about 8 months, when they're mature enough. Was that your question? I would say it's the partnerships, right, on our side. We don't try to solve all the problems. We're a collaborative autonomy company. We're not a logistics company. And we know that, right? So we reach out to the experts. Even SAIC, I think, has a lot of work in the operational space, right?
Absolutely. And to Admiral Corey's point in the digital engineering, which lends itself to, the digital manufacturing perspective, as well as, we're putting some additive manufacturing capabilities even afloat, right? So that there's an organic capability for the Navy as well.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate your insight.
Thank you. Sir, I think we have time for just one more question.
Good morning, sir. Petty Officer First Class Gonzalez on board USS Macon Island. My question is specifically on, it's a crude question, but where do we intend to deploy these vessels? All right, the construct of space on naval vessels as it is hard, right? Especially when we have Marine Expedition Units on board and we want to do sets and reps. Where do we intend to deploy them? What combat capabilities can we have if we don't have the space or the warship designed just for those vessels?
Please help yourself.
So from an industry perspective, you cannot launch these things from DDGs or LCSs, right? If you think about the actual use case, when the balloon goes up, those things are nowhere near where it needs to be, right? So you have got to make sure that the vessels you build can be launched from unprepared sites, right? Think, the Marine Corps and the Army are preparing to operate from hundreds of islands, right? Those islands don't have cranes, they don't have piers, so we built our boats to make sure that literally 2 sailors or 2 Marines can push it out of the soft zone, right? Or from a tiny marina. If you're going to need manned ships like a $3 billion DDG, the whole thing falls apart, right? You don't want to launch 100 boats that cost $150,000 from a $3 billion destroyer and put that at risk, right? So it's thinking through the .mil PF, right? How are you going to deploy these assets and in what condition? Because you're absolutely right? The DDG has better missions and more important thing to do than launch cheap boats off of the DDG.
Yeah, Petty Officer Gonzalez, that's a great question. For the aircraft carrier side, the MQ-25 is about ready to fly. It's going to come aboard the ship. The space constraints on the carrier was central to the entire imagining of how unmanned airplanes are going to be brought aboard the ship. It forced industry partnership that had never been done before. I happened to be in the room when people were informed what they were going to do, and it wasn't an easy job. The space has always been a challenge on ships, and it's always going to be a challenge. I think what I would hope that you and your shipmates would do is make sure that folks like those on the panel don't get it wrong. Because you are living it every single day, and you're going to have an input. So I appreciate you approaching the mic, and I hope you keep speaking up.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir?
All right. Well, I think that unfortunately we have wrapped up the panel. I think we'd love to talk about this all day, but there's other conversations that are going to be had. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for joining me. Appreciate the conversation.